Visual Art 2D. I wanted to show you today a few of the detailing pieces that you'll need for your collage. I know that some of you are not quite ready for these steps yet, but you will be eventually. And what this will provide for you is not only just a demo on how to use some of the detailing techniques, but also a safety video as well for working with the X-Acto blades, which is going to be one of the additional tools that you might end up using. So I want to start by talking a little bit about the use of the X-Acto blades and how that might be handy with your collage. So in my collage here, I'm thinking about doing the water that I have, and instead of just chunking apart pieces like I'm starting in through the pink sand that I have, I want to actually end up working with some very thin strips of color that start to intermingle as far as the color of blue and also the value. So instead of using, again, chunks of pieces, I actually want to work with some very, very thin strips. So I can certainly cut those with scissors, but something else that you might be wanting to use is going to be the X-Acto blade. This is going to be able to give you a very thin cut and a very fine-tuned line. Some of you are going to find this useful if you have some smaller details in your collage. I know that some people are working with some palm trees and things like that, which may actually require almost what looks like a thick line versus a chunk of a piece of the magazine. So this would probably be a good tool for you to use. So this will serve as your safety demo for using the X-Acto blade if you choose to use it for this particular piece. If you don't, at least you'll have the understanding and the knowledge of being able to use the X-Acto blade in case you might need it for something else. So I'm going to switch my images here a little bit. I'm going to move my collage over to the side, my reference over to the side, and when you're using the X-Acto blades, you are going to need one of these cutting mats. They are located in the storage spaces closest to the end of the window. And you're going to want to have one of those to protect your table. So please make sure to grab one when you're using the X-Acto blades. When working with this particular material, so the magazine paper, it's going to be really easy to cut through. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the X-Acto blade, some precautions you need to take, and some things you should and should not do when you're using the tool itself. All right, so I have my magazine set up ready to go. I am going to be using some of these turquoise blues, some of this lighter blue at the top, and again, I want to make some very thin strips. So I have my cutting mat already set up and ready to go. I'm going to turn my paper because it's going to be a little easier to cut that way. And then I'm going to get my X-Acto blade ready. If you've never worked with an X-Acto before, essentially it is a razor blade. It's very sharp, so you do want to be careful with it. When you get them, you want to be gentle when taking the lid off. And your X-Acto blade is going to be nice and sharp. And you want to watch yourself when using the X-Acto blade so that we don't get any cuts, scrapes, or little nicks. You will want to hold this almost like you're holding a pen or a pencil. You do not want to hold the X-Acto blade by wrapping all the way around the handle. Again, you want to keep a firm yet controlled grip on the X-Acto blade itself so that we don't run into any accidents. When you're cutting through, especially the material like magazines, you are not going to need to add a lot of force. Okay, in fact, let the tool do the work for you. You do not want to add a ton of pressure since you're only cutting through the thinnest of pieces of paper. When you go to hold your material, in this case the magazine paper, you want to know where your fingers are at all times. Yes, accidents can happen if you're not careful. You want to always be sure that when you're working with the X-Acto blade that you know where your finger and thumb are, so that by accident, if your X-Acto happens to slip, that you don't cut into your finger. All right, so I'm going to make a couple of little quick cuts here. And since I'm going to be making very small, thin strips, I'm going to use my fingers and I'm going to hold towards the top of my paper. And I'm going to start making just a very thin, controlled movement I am not adding a lot of pressure, right? And it's going to make a nice clean cut on the magazine paper, right? I'm going to take that little strip there. I'm going to hold just off to the side. Sometimes it's just the trickiest part is getting it started, which I just did. And then I'm just using the point again so I can be nice and precise with this. And then I'm going to start to work at creating these really thin strips of magazine. Now, once I have a few of these created, I'm going to bring them over to my collage, and I can start to figure out how I might want to add those as part of the collage process itself. When you're finished with the X-Acto blade, always put the lid back on. Being careful when putting it back on to make sure that the lid is actually on the X-Acto. You do have to watch when you do this because sometimes they have little cuts in them, little grooves, okay, in the cap. You want to watch that the blade is not going through it, okay? So just be aware when you're putting the lid back on, still understanding where your fingers are so that we don't run into any accidents. Okay, now if I start to have some strips of paper like I do now, I could certainly come over to my collage, again, using my reference as a guide, and then I could begin to start to glue those down. Gluing them down, exact same process as you would if you were putting down chunks. Again, I like to take and put a little glue down onto the paper first. And a nice thin layer. We don't need a ton of glue underneath. And then I'm going to use that same gluey Q-tip to come over here, grab a hold of the paper strip that I'm working with, and then I'm going to go ahead and glue that down. Okay, and again, this might require just a little bit of manipulation, but I'm going to bring that down, and then I'm also going to use the little bit of glue that's left over to go over top of my strip to make sure that it is glued down. All right, now by chance, that paper strip happened to be just about the right size, okay, for my image. It doesn't always work out that way. If I would have needed to, I could glue down that paper strip, or if it's another detail, glue down what I needed. I could cut away the rest. I could tear away the rest. In fact, this next one that I'm going to lay down, I'm going to put it partially up against the other one, but I'm not going to go all the way across this time. And once I start to go part way, I'm going to, again, sort of seal over top with a little bit of glue. For me, I'm just going to lay my finger down and just give a quick little pop, okay? And that's going to remove the excess, which I can then use in another area, right? But this could be a way that you could work with some directional changes with your pieces, start to work into some smaller, more detailed pieces. Some of you will need this as we work through our layers and eventually you do get to some detail work. But I wanted to show you how to use the X-Acto blade so that you're ready to go for when or if that tool is something that would be useful as part of your collaging process. So again, always make sure when you're using the X-Acto blades, you have one of the cutting mats. You need to always make sure that you know where your fingers are when you're using the X-Acto. And again, gently pulling that X-Acto blade, watching that you're not pulling too close to your body, definitely watching that you're not pulling too close to a thumb or a finger, and always being aware of what's going on when using the X-Acto blades in order to help you with your work here in class.